A racist airport security agent assumes that a black man is suspicious and detains him for no reason. He is shocked to learn the black man is a lawyer who files a massive lawsuit. Marcus Hayes adjusted his watch as he approached the security checkpoint, hoping to make it through quickly. He had just under an hour to catch his flight. It was a big case, and every second counted. The line inched forward, and he went through the usual motions. Belt off, shoes in the bin, laptop out. "Sir, can you step over here, please?" A voice cut through the usual noise, stopping him cold. Marcus glanced up. The airport security agent, a stocky man with a hard expression, motioned him aside. He was used to the occasional extra screening, but this felt different. He took a breath, reminding himself to stay calm. "What's the issue?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Routine check," the agent replied, his tone brisk. "Nothing to worry about." Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly, catching the flicker of unease in the agent's gaze. He knew that look. He'd seen it many times before, on cases and in courtrooms. He kept his cool, but there was an edge to his voice as he asked, "What's the routine here? I'm just trying to make my flight." The agent didn't answer. Instead, he motioned for a second agent, a young woman who looked somewhat uncomfortable. She joined them reluctantly, glancing nervously at Marcus. The first agent cleared his throat. "You seem a little nervous, sir. Where are you traveling?" "Chicago, on business," Marcus replied, his voice tight. "And I'm not nervous. Just trying to catch my flight. Unless you plan on holding me here?" The agent's expression hardened. "Look, we're just doing our job. Mind answering a few questions?" Marcus gave a small, tense smile. "I don't mind answering questions, but I do mind missing my flight over routine checks." The agent crossed his arms. "We have protocols, sir. It's standard procedure to check anything suspicious." Marcus felt his patience fray. "Suspicious? What's suspicious about me trying to get on a plane?" The agent's eyes held firm, unyielding. "Just answer the questions, please." Marcus gave a long exhale. "Fine. Ask away." The questions started simple but soon turned invasive. The agent pressed about his travel plans, where he worked, and what kind of business he had in Chicago. Marcus's answers grew shorter, his patience running thin. He watched the clock, every second draining his chance of making it to court in time. Finally, he looked at the agent directly. "I've answered your questions. Am I free to go?" The agent exchanged a look with his colleague. "It's standard procedure, sir. Cooperate, and we'll get you on your way." "I've cooperated. My flight leaves soon," Marcus snapped. "Now, unless you have a valid reason for detaining me." The agent's face darkened. "Listen, sir, if you don't want to comply, we can make this more difficult." "More difficult?" Marcus's voice grew colder. "You're already making it difficult, Agent Willis," the agent replied, his expression unchanging. "Well, Agent Willis, I'm a civil rights attorney. I know my rights, and I know when I'm being profiled. So, unless you're about to charge me with something, let me catch my flight." Willis's mouth tightened. "Profiled? We don't profile, sir. Just a security check. Your cooperation is appreciated." Marcus glanced down at his watch, calculating how little time he had left. Anger simmered just below the surface. "I'm more than willing to cooperate when there's a reason, but I'm not going to sit here indefinitely because of your concerns." Willis seemed to hesitate for a moment, but his face remained set. "Just a few more questions. Routine, like I said." "Right," Marcus replied, the sarcasm in his tone unmistakable. He turned his gaze to the female agent, who shifted uncomfortably. She spoke up, her voice hesitant. "Agent Willis, maybe we could—" Willis cut her off with a glance. "We're following procedure, Tran." Marcus let out a frustrated sigh, realizing this wasn't going to end anytime soon. He looked down at his watch, feeling the chance to make his flight slipping away, moment by agonizing moment. Marcus's patience was nearly gone as he watched the hands on his watch tick forward. Every minute felt like another slap in the face, a reminder that he was being singled out for nothing more than the color of his skin. "Agent Willis," Marcus began, trying to keep his voice level. "I've answered all your questions, provided every bit of information you've requested. I have a flight to catch, and unless there's an actual reason to hold me here, I'd like to be on my way." Willis raised an eyebrow, clearly unfazed. "Look, Mr. Hayes, if you cooperate, this will go a lot faster." "I've been cooperating," Marcus replied, his voice tight, "for nearly 30 minutes. You're blocking me from making my flight. This isn't a security check, it's harassment." The agent's expression remained unreadable, a slight smirk twitching at the corner of his mouth. "Your attitude isn't helping, sir." "Attitude?" Marcus replied, incredulous. "You've questioned everything from my travel plans to my occupation, with no grounds other than your concerns. What exactly is suspicious about me trying to board a plane? Willis folded his arms. Suspicious behavior can't be ignored. People have been known to use all kinds of tactics to evade security. Marcus's jaw tightened, his anger simmering just below the surface. He looked over at Agent Tran, who seemed increasingly uncomfortable. Her eyes darted between him and Willis, but she kept silent, as if afraid to contradict her superior. "Look," Marcus said, turning back to Willis. "I'm not sure what you think I'm hiding, but I've been more than forthcoming. Am I free to go, or are you officially detaining me?" Willis's expression turned steely. "If you're unwilling to cooperate, we'll be forced to escalate this further." "Escalate?" Marcus echoed, unable to keep the edge from his voice. "Agent Willis, you're detaining me without probable cause and blocking me from my flight." Willis's tone remained icy. "We're simply doing our job. You're the one who's making this difficult." Marcus clenched his fists at his sides, forcing himself to stay calm. "I'd like to speak to your supervisor." Willis's mouth twisted into a thin smile. "My supervisor isn't available. If you'd like to file a complaint, you're welcome to do so. After we finish here." "I need to make my flight," Marcus said, his voice a low, dangerous tone. Willis didn't blink. "Security protocol takes precedence. Now please place your hands behind your back. We're going to take you in for further questioning." Marcus's eyes widened. "You're detaining me? For what?" "Failure to comply with security procedures," Willis replied, his tone cold. "It's protocol, sir." Agent Tran took a hesitant step forward, glancing between Marcus and Willis. "Agent Willis, is this really necessary? He's been cooperative." Willis shot her a sharp look. "Tran, I don't need input on this. Step back." Marcus looked at Tran, who seemed almost apologetic as she withdrew. He returned his gaze to Willis, his voice calm but unyielding. "This is profiling, plain and simple. And I won't let it slide." Willis gave a tight, dismissive smile. "You can discuss that once we're done here." "Hands behind your back." Marcus held his ground, his gaze never leaving Willis's. "You're making a mistake." Willis's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." Two other agents approached, and before Marcus could react, they grabbed his arms and roughly pulled his hands behind his back, cuffing him. He felt a surge of anger, the injustice burning through him as he was led away from the security line, the airport patrons staring and whispering. Marcus sat in a sterile, dimly lit room, his hands still cuffed as he waited. The blank walls around him seemed to close in, amplifying his frustration and simmering rage. He could hear the faint hum of activity outside, the sounds of people coming and going freely. While he sat detained for no reason other than the color of his skin, he glanced at the clock. Nearly an hour had passed. His flight was long gone by now, and his mind churned with anger and disbelief. He'd seen discrimination before, had fought against it in courtrooms, yet he'd hoped, or maybe convinced himself, that his position, his success, his humanity, would somehow grant him some level of respect. But here he was, treated like a threat simply for showing up. The door opened, and Agent Willis stepped in, carrying the same cold expression he'd worn in the security line. "Am I free to go?" Marcus demanded, cutting straight to the point. Willis didn't answer immediately. He set down a thin folder and crossed his arms. "We're still reviewing your case." "My case?" Marcus scoffed. "This isn't a case, Agent Willis. It's profiling, plain and simple. You don't have a shred of evidence to justify detaining me. This is about my appearance, nothing else." Willis's expression remained impassive, though a flicker of something crossed his eyes. "We're investigating, Mr. Hayes. There are protocols to follow." "Protocols?" Marcus's voice was laced with contempt. "Your protocols are designed to keep people like me under suspicion. This isn't about security. It's about prejudice." Willis sighed, as if he were dealing with an unruly child. "Mr. Hayes, we see suspicious behavior every day from all types of people. We're just doing our job." "Suspicious behavior?" Marcus leaned forward, his tone sharp. "I was walking through security. My only behavior was showing up as a black man in a suit, and I'd bet anything you wouldn't be questioning me if I looked like you." Willis's jaw tightened, but he kept his tone measured. "Your accusations aren't going to help your case, Mr. Hayes. Cooperation would be better for you in the long run." Marcus let out a bitter laugh. "Cooperation? I've been cooperating since you dragged me aside. And here I am, missing my flight, detained for no reason except your assumptions." Willis remained silent, his expression unchanging. "Let me ask you something," Marcus continued, his voice calm but laced with steel. "If I were white, if I looked normal to you, would I be sitting here cuffed like a criminal, or would I be on my way to my meeting by now?" Willis didn't respond, but Marcus could see the faint flush of irritation creeping into his expression. "That's what I thought," Marcus said softly. the words cutting through the silence like a blade. "You might try to hide behind protocol, but we both know what this is." Just then, the door opened again, and Agent Tran stepped inside, her gaze shifting uncomfortably between Marcus and Willis. She looked hesitant, almost as if she didn't want to be there. "Agent Tran," Marcus said, fixing his gaze on her. "You saw everything that happened back there. You know this was about more than security." Tran swallowed, clearly torn. "Mr. Hayes, I don't make those decisions," Willis interjected, his voice sharp. "Tran, you're dismissed. I have this under control." Tran hesitated, her gaze lingering on Marcus for a moment, before she nodded and slipped out of the room. As the door closed behind her, Marcus leaned back, fixing a steely gaze on Willis. "You can't keep me here indefinitely. Sooner or later you'll have to let me go. And when you do, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what happened here." Willis gave a thin smile. "You can file any complaints you want after the fact, Mr. Hayes. But while you're here, we'll conduct our investigation as we see fit." Marcus clenched his fists, a wave of fury surging through him. But he forced himself to breathe, to remember who he was and what he stood for. They might see him as just another black man they could dismiss, but they'd underestimated him. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet, but full of resolve. "You might think you're in control, Agent Willis, but when I walk out of here, this investigation is going to follow you. Because I'm not the one who's in the wrong here. You are. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows it." Willis's face tightened, but he said nothing, merely watching as Marcus held his gaze, unyielding. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in the metal chair, wrists aching from the cuffs, and the hours he had spent locked in this cold, windowless room. The echo of footsteps outside the door kept pulling his attention, each time thinking it might be someone finally coming to release him. But each time, it was nothing. He had missed his flight by now, the one he'd so meticulously planned to ensure he could defend his client on time. The weight of that loss simmered in his chest, alongside the indignation of sitting here like a common criminal. For what? Walking through security? At long last, the door opened, and Agent Willis stepped in, the same smug expression etched on his face. "Well, Mr. Hayes," he began, crossing his arms as he leaned against the wall. "Seems we're ready to let you go." Marcus stared back at him, his face a mask of calm, but his eyes blazed with anger. "Finally! I've been sitting here for hours, with no reason, no charges, nothing. What was this? Some kind of game to you?" Willis chuckled, his smile barely concealing a sneer. "Oh, don't get so worked up. You know, Mr. Hayes, you're not the first to throw around words like profiling and discrimination as soon as things don't go your way." "Things don't go my way?" Marcus echoed, incredulous. "I was detained because of the way I look, nothing more." Willis smirked. "Funny. How people like you are always so quick to play the victim card." Marcus's fists clenched, his voice steady but cold. "People like me?" "Yeah," Willis replied, his gaze narrowing. "Always quick to blame racism for everything, as if the world's out to get you. Maybe if you'd shown a little respect, we wouldn't be here right now." Marcus took a slow breath, fighting to keep his composure. "Respect? I cooperated with every question you asked. What more could you possibly want?" Willis let out a dismissive laugh. "Respect doesn't mean mouthing off with that attitude of yours, walking around like you're entitled to special treatment. You know, most people don't get so high and mighty." "Special treatment?" Marcus repeated, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. "All I wanted was to make my flight. I've got a job to do, responsibilities to fulfill, just like anyone else." "Oh, I'm sure you do," Willis said with a condescending tone. "Running off to some big city law office, thinking you're something special. But newsflash, Mr. Hayes, no one cares, especially not here." Marcus's jaw tightened, every word fueling the anger smoldering in his chest. "You're saying I deserve to be treated like this because I'm black?" Willis shrugged, his eyes gleaming with a smug satisfaction. "I didn't say that. But if that's how you want to see it, maybe there's a reason." Marcus's breath slowed, his entire body tense. "So that's what this was about. Profiling me because I don't fit the image you think belongs in first class, or on a plane, or even walking through security." Willis shook his head, a mocking laugh escaping. "You're so quick to jump to conclusions. But people don't realize, it's people like you who make things harder for everyone else." "People like me?" Marcus shot back, his voice dangerously quiet. "Who stand up for their rights? Who refuse to back down when they're treated unjustly?" "Rights?" Willis scoffed. "You don't get special rights just because you decide to throw a tantrum." "This isn't a tantrum," Marcus replied, his voice steady as steel. This is me demanding the respect and fair treatment that every human deserves. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? Willis leaned in closer, his smile twisted with disdain. You know, maybe it's your problem. Coming in here, acting like you're untouchable, thinking you can just stroll through security like you own the place. Marcus stared back, unflinching. I know my rights, and I know this is illegal detention. You have nothing on me, Willis. Nothing but your own bias. Willis's face darkened, his smug demeanor slipping for a moment. Bias? You keep saying that like it's some magic word that'll get you out of everything. But guess what, Mr. Hayes? No one cares about your self-righteous speeches. You're just another face in the system. Marcus felt a cold anger settle over him, his voice dropping to a low, calm tone. If I'm just another face, why do you look so threatened? Willis's eyes flickered with a hint of anger before he forced a smile. Threatened? Don't flatter yourself. You're just another complainer, making excuses and pointing fingers. Maybe if you focused more on getting in line, you wouldn't find yourself in situations like this. Marcus leaned forward, his voice firm. No, Agent Willis, it's people like you who abuse their power, who think they can get away with anything because of a badge. But this time, you're wrong, because I'm not letting this go. Willis chuckled, his laugh filled with mockery. You think anyone's going to care? Go ahead, file your little complaint. See how far it gets you. Oh, I will, Marcus replied, his voice cool. But it won't be a little complaint. You can be sure of that. Willis's face tightened again, but he forced a cold smile. Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you, Mr. Hayes. People like you never get far. You're just asking for trouble. Marcus gave a thin, bitter smile. And people like you never think they'll face consequences. But this time, you will. With a final sneer, Willis unlocked the cuffs and stepped back, motioning to the door. Get out of here. And don't let the door hit you on the way out. Marcus stood, rubbing his sore wrists. But he didn't rush. Instead, he held Willis's gaze, letting the silence speak volumes. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door, looking back one last time. You'll remember this day, Agent Willis, because I won't forget it. Willis's sneer faded slightly as Marcus walked out, his footsteps steady and unhurried. Every stride felt like a statement, a silent promise that this encounter would not end here. Marcus left the airport with a storm of emotions brewing inside him. Anger, frustration, but most of all, a burning resolve. He pulled out his phone and began documenting everything, recording a voice memo as he walked to capture every detail while it was fresh. He described the hours spent in detention, the smug grin on Willis's face, and every racist remark that had dripped from the agent's mouth. This was not going to be another incident swept under the rug. The next morning, Marcus walked into his law firm, files in hand, and headed straight to Ava Martinez's office. She looked up from her desk, eyes widening as she took in his determined expression. Marcus, I saw the missed call last night. I was worried. Eva's tone was a mix of concern and controlled anger. They detained me at the airport, Marcus said, his voice hard. Hours of interrogation, invasive questioning, and nothing to show for it except missed court proceedings. All because I looked suspicious to them. Eva's face tightened, anger flickering in her eyes. They detained you over that? And cost you your client's hearing? They had no grounds. Just their assumptions and that agent's thinly veiled prejudice, Marcus replied, tossing a file onto her desk. I want to file a lawsuit. I'm not letting them get away with this. Eva opened the file, skimming over the documentation he had already begun to prepare. Good. This is going to take more than a few formal complaints. We're going to need a solid case if we want this to stick. Marcus nodded. I know, and I'm ready to go after them. There's a junior agent, Tran, who was there. She looked uncomfortable with how Willis was handling things. I think she'd testify if we asked. Ava's eyes lit up with a sharp focus. Then we'll reach out to her. If we can get her testimony, and maybe security footage from the airport, we might have a case strong enough to draw public attention. I want this to be more than just another lawsuit, Marcus said, his voice steely. I want this to be a statement, to show them they can't keep doing this. Eva nodded, her gaze steady and supportive. Then let's make sure this is airtight. They're going to fight it every step of the way. Airport security will defend their agents, claim everything was by the book, but with the right evidence, we can prove that the book isn't protecting people. It's profiling them. Marcus clenched his jaw, the memory of Willis's sneer fresh in his mind. They think they can intimidate people into silence, that they can treat us however they want and get away with it. But they picked the wrong person this time. Eva flipped through a few more pages, her mind already running through strategies. This is more than just your case, Marcus. This could be a turning point. If we can expose their behavior, others might come forward. And airport security will have to answer for more than just what they did to you. She picked up her phone, dialing a contact to start the formal process of filing the suit. We'll submit the complaint and contact Tran. Hopefully she'll be willing to speak on the record. Later that day, Marcus and Ava walked into the courthouse to formally file the lawsuit. The moment the papers were submitted, they knew there was no turning back. This was going to be a battle, one that Marcus was more than ready to fight. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of reporters had already gathered, cameras flashing as they spotted him. Word of the lawsuit had clearly spread, and the press wasted no time pressing him for a statement. Mr. Hayes, can you tell us why you're filing this lawsuit? Is this about racial profiling by airport security? What are you hoping to achieve with this case? Marcus raised a hand, quieting the questions before speaking. This isn't just about what happened to me. It's about holding our institutions accountable, making sure they don't get away with profiling and mistreating people based on race. No one should have to go through what I went through, and it's time we took a stand against these discriminatory practices. Another reporter raised her voice above the crowd. Do you believe this case could lead to wider reform? Marcus met her gaze, his tone steady. That's exactly what I hope for. This isn't just about one incident. It's about pushing for real change, so no one else has to feel targeted or threatened for simply existing. This isn't just my fight. It's everyone's. After answering a few more questions, Marcus and Ava left the courthouse, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. As they walked back to the office, they discussed strategies, possible obstacles, and ways to anticipate airport security's defenses. They knew the agency would pull out all the stops to defend itself and discredit Marcus's claims. But Marcus was prepared for whatever they threw at him. Back at the office, they spent hours reviewing evidence, organizing witness statements, and preparing subpoenas for any surveillance footage from the terminal that day. Every detail was scrutinized, every angle covered. Ava paused at one point, looking up from her notes. You know they'll try to paint you as hostile, Marcus. They'll argue that you were the one causing trouble. Marcus gave a tight smile, bitterness lacing his tone. Let them try. I've got my own testimony. Trans if she agrees, and the truth on my side. They can twist it however they want, but facts don't lie. Eva nodded, her expression hardening. Good, because we're going to need every ounce of resolve for this. This isn't just about winning a case, it's about setting a precedent. Marcus's gaze was steady as he looked at her, his voice filled with quiet determination. Then let's make sure we're ready. They might have their policies and procedures, but we have justice on our side. I'm not backing down. Not now, not ever. The rest of the evening was spent meticulously building their case, every moment bringing them closer to the showdown ahead. For Marcus, this was more than just a fight for himself. It was a stand against a system that had mistreated countless others, and he was ready to see it through to the end. The lawsuit filing made headlines quickly, gaining traction in the media and stirring public debate. News outlets covered Marcus's story, from the details of his detainment to the accusations of racial profiling against the airport security. Social media was flooded with reactions, as people shared their own experiences and voiced support. But there were also plenty of critics. Marcus sat at his desk, scrolling through online comments. Some were supportive, with people applauding his courage, but others were laced with skepticism and hostility. Here we go again. Another guy playing the race card, one comment read. Probably acted suspiciously, and now wants to blame everyone else, said another. He shook his head, feeling the familiar pang of frustration. No matter how carefully he explained himself, or how much evidence he provided, there would always be those who dismissed his experience outright, who insisted he was overreacting, or looking for attention. But he knew the truth, and he knew what he'd gone through. He wouldn't let the negativity sway him. Eva entered his office, her expression a mix of encouragement and caution. I saw the media coverage. It's getting a lot of attention, Marcus. We expected backlash, but this is intense. He looked up from his screen, his face calm but determined. I'm not surprised. They want people like me to stay quiet, to be afraid of speaking out. But that's not happening here. Eva nodded, sitting down across from him. Airport security has issued a statement denying any racial profiling. They're calling it a routine security check and saying you were uncooperative. They're painting you as a potential security threat. Marcus let out a bitter laugh. A security threat. That's convenient. And by routine, they mean hours of invasive questions, racist comments, and detainment without cause. They're trying to control the narrative, Eva said. And it's working on some people. But we have facts on our side. We need to keep pushing forward with evidence and a clear message. Just then, Marcus's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, seeing an unknown number, but answered anyway. "This is Marcus Hayes. Mr. Hayes," came a familiar voice. Agent Tran. She sounded nervous, but her tone was resolute. I heard about the lawsuit, and I think I'm ready to talk." Marcus's heart lifted. "Thank you, Agent Tran. I know this isn't easy for you, but your testimony could make all the difference." There was a pause on the line before Tran continued, her voice a little shaky. "I didn't agree with what Agent Willis was doing. I could see how wrong it was, but I didn't know how to speak up. I was afraid I'd lose my job." Marcus softened his tone, hoping to reassure her. "I understand. It took a lot of courage for you to reach out. We'll protect you as much as we can, and I promise you, your voice matters in this case." Tran hesitated before replying, "I'm willing to make a statement about what I saw. I can't let this go on. If no one stands up, it'll keep happening to other people." "Thank you," Marcus replied, relief flooding his voice. "We'll arrange a time to meet with our legal team and document everything." As he ended the call, Eva looked at him with a smile. "That's a huge break. Tran's testimony can reinforce our case, especially with airport security trying to deny everything." Marcus nodded, a feeling of hope growing within him. She's taking a big risk, but her statement could be what tips this in our favor. The next few days were a whirlwind. As news of Tran's involvement leaked, media coverage of the case intensified. Reporters reached out for her story, curious about her motives for speaking out, and her courage was praised by some, while others labeled her a traitor. Meanwhile, airport security doubled down on their defense, releasing more statements that attempted to discredit Marcus's account. They painted a picture of him as an uncooperative passenger, someone who resisted routine security measures and escalated the situation himself. Marcus's inbox filled with emails, some of them supportive messages from strangers who had faced similar situations, others from critics accusing him of seeking publicity or monetary gain. One email caught his eye. The subject line read, "You're ruining airport security's reputation." The email was brief, but biting. "People like you always have to make everything about race. Airport security is just doing their job. You're not special. Stop trying to tear down hardworking agents with your accusations." Marcus felt a flash of anger, but he reminded himself that this was the very reason he was fighting. The dismissive comments, the blatant denial. It was all part of a larger problem. If he backed down now, he'd be giving in to the exact attitudes that enabled these abuses to continue. Eva stepped into his office, her face serious. "I think we should consider a press conference, Marcus. If we don't respond publicly, airport security's version of the story will continue to dominate." He nodded slowly, understanding the importance of controlling the narrative. "You're right. We need to be proactive. Let's organize something for this week. We'll address the evidence, Tran's testimony, and lay out our case for everyone to see." A few days later, they held the press conference, facing a sea of cameras and reporters. Marcus stood at the podium, Eva at his side. He took a breath, steadying himself before he spoke. "Thank you all for being here. I filed this lawsuit not because of a personal grievance, but because I believe no one should be treated unfairly based on assumptions or appearances. My experience was not an isolated incident. It's part of a larger issue that affects countless people." He paused, scanning the room as reporters took notes and cameras clicked. "I was detained without cause, questioned, and humiliated for hours. I was seen as suspicious simply because of my race. This is a pattern we can't ignore." Eva stepped forward, adding, "Agent Tran, who was present during the detainment, has come forward to testify. Her statement supports what Mr. Hayes experienced. We're not here to destroy reputations. We're here to demand accountability and reform within the airport security." Reporters shouted questions, some probing, others openly skeptical. "Mr. Hayes, how do you respond to accusations that you were uncooperative with airport security?" Marcus looked directly at the reporter, his voice unwavering. "I was cooperative from the start, but there comes a point when compliance turns into submission. I answered every question, yet they continued to hold me without cause. That's not security, that's profiling." Another reporter asked, "Do you believe this case could change airport security policies?" "That's my hope," Marcus replied firmly. "This lawsuit isn't just about my experience. It's about pushing for reforms so that everyone, regardless of race, can travel without fear of discrimination." The press conference ended with a mixture of applause and skeptical murmurs. As Marcus and Eva left the podium, he felt the weight of the moment settle on him. He had exposed himself to intense scrutiny, risking his reputation and career. But he knew this fight was worth it. The backlash would continue. The critics would persist, but he was prepared. This wasn't just about one encounter. It was about making sure no one else had to face the same indignity. And he wouldn't stop until justice was served. The day of the trial had finally arrived, and the atmosphere in the packed courtroom was tense. News of Marcus's lawsuit against airport security had drawn considerable public attention, and the stakes were high. Marcus sat at the plaintiff's table next to Ava, who had spent countless hours helping him build an ironclad case. Across from them sat airport security's legal team, flanked by Agent Willis, who looked as smug and defiant as ever. The case wasn't just about proving racial profiling. It was about holding airport security accountable for unlawful detainment, abuse of authority, and discrimination. Marcus had filed charges against airport security, and Agent Willis for racial profiling, unlawful detention, emotional distress, and abuse of power. The judge entered, and the courtroom quieted as the trial began. Airport security's attorney opened with a polished statement, arguing that Marcus's detainment was a routine security measure, taken to ensure passenger safety. Agent Willis was following airport security protocol, the attorney said confidently, casting a glance at the jury. Mr. Hayes displayed unusual behavior, which warranted additional screening. Marcus clenched his jaw but kept his gaze steady, knowing his turn would come. When it was time for Marcus to speak, he took a deep breath and addressed the jury with conviction. "This isn't a case about security," he began, his voice steady. "This is about racial profiling, about being detained and humiliated for no reason other than my appearance. Airport security claims this was a routine check, but nothing about it was routine." Marcus explained each moment of his detention, recounting how Agent Willis had escalated the situation with increasingly invasive and degrading questions, and how he was ultimately detained without cause. "This was not about protecting passengers," he said. "This was about a perception, a deeply ingrained bias that saw me as a threat because of the color of my skin." He saw several jurors shifting in their seats, his words clearly resonating. Eva then called Agent Tran to the stand. Tran looked nervous but resolute as she took her seat, glancing at Marcus with a nod of encouragement. Eva approached her with a respectful tone. "Agent Tran, you were present during Mr. Hayes' detainment. Did you believe Agent Willis's actions were justified?" Tran hesitated, then shook her head. "No, from the beginning I felt it was excessive. Mr. Hayes wasn't acting suspiciously. He just wanted to get to his flight. But Agent Willis kept pushing, kept questioning, until it felt like he was looking for a reason to detain him." The airport security attorney quickly jumped in, trying to discredit her testimony. "Agent Tran, isn't it possible that Mr. Hayes appeared nervous or defensive? You are trained to recognize potential security risks after all." Tran's voice grew firmer. "Yes, but Mr. Hayes wasn't behaving in a way that suggested he was hiding something. He was frustrated, but he was calm. It was Agent Willis who kept escalating things." The airport security attorney pressed further. "So you're suggesting that Agent Willis's actions were motivated by bias?" Tran took a deep breath. "Yes, I believe Agent Willis targeted Mr. Hayes because of how he looked." The courtroom buzzed, and Marcus felt a surge of hope. Tran's courage to speak the truth was reinforcing his case in ways he hadn't anticipated. When Agent Willis took the stand, his demeanor was as smug as ever. He downplayed his actions, claiming everything he did was by the book, and that Marcus's attitude justified further questioning. "Mr. Hayes was uncooperative from the start," Willis said, shooting Marcus a glare. "He kept questioning my authority, refusing to answer questions directly. In my experience, that kind of behavior often signals a security risk." Eva leaned forward, her voice firm. "So, Agent Willis, in your view, someone asking about their rights is a threat?" Willis hesitated. "It's unusual. Most people comply without question." Eva's gaze was sharp. "So, because Mr. Hayes stood up for his rights, you deemed him suspicious and escalated the situation?" Willis's confidence faltered slightly. "I did what I thought was necessary for security." Eva continued pressing. "Necessary for security? Or necessary to assert control over someone who didn't conform to your expectations?" Willis shifted uncomfortably, his confidence visibly cracking. "I was just following procedure." The evidence presented throughout the trial continued to build a compelling case against airport security. Surveillance footage showed Marcus acting calm and compliant during the initial encounter, disproving Willis's claim of uncooperative behavior. Tran's testimony further reinforced Marcus's account, painting a picture of a detainment rooted in bias rather than protocol. As the trial progressed, the airport security's case weakened. Marcus had made a strong argument not only for racial profiling, but for the specific charges he'd filed: racial profiling, unlawful detention, emotional distress, and abuse of power. Each charge emphasized the broader issue of profiling and abuse within airport security practices. Finally, Marcus took the stand for his closing statement, his voice steady and filled with quiet determination. "This isn't just about me," he began, looking directly at the jury. "It's about accountability. It's about ensuring that no one else has to go through what I did. I was detained, humiliated, and made to feel less than human for no reason other than the way I look. Airport security has tried to justify this as a security measure, but we all know what it was: profiling. Plain and simple." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Today, I'm asking you to hold them accountable, to send a message that racial profiling has no place in our society. This case is about more than just a one-time incident. It's about demanding change, about protecting the rights of every individual who walks through an airport." The judge dismissed the court for deliberation, and Marcus sat back, heart pounding as he awaited the jury's decision. Hours passed before the jury returned, their expressions serious. The courtroom fell silent as the foreperson rose to deliver the verdict. "We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Marcus Hayes, and rule that airport security's actions constituted racial profiling, unlawful detention, emotional distress, and abuse of power. We further recommend that airport security undergo policy reforms to prevent future incidents of discrimination and profiling." A wave of relief washed over Marcus. He felt Eva squeeze his shoulder, her face filled with pride and satisfaction. They had won, not just for him, but for everyone who had been subjected to unfair treatment. The judge addressed the airport security representatives sternly. "This case has highlighted serious issues within your organization's protocols. I strongly urge airport security to implement comprehensive reforms to prevent racial profiling and ensure that all passengers are treated with respect and fairness." Outside the courthouse, a crowd of supporters cheered as Marcus and Eva stepped forward to address the media. Reporters thrust microphones forward, eager for his response. "Today's verdict is a victory for justice," Marcus said, his voice strong. "This case was never just about me. It was about holding institutions accountable for discriminatory practices, about standing up against racial profiling. I hope this serves as a warning that we won't stand for injustice." The crowd erupted in applause, and Marcus felt a surge of hope. This trial was more than just a personal fight. It was a step toward meaningful change. As he left the courthouse, he felt the weight of the struggle lift, knowing he had taken a stand. This case would set a precedent, a reminder to those in power that they were not above accountability. And though there was still work to be done, Marcus was ready to continue the fight for justice. A few days after the verdict, Marcus sat in his office, sorting through a stack of files, when his phone buzzed with an alert. He glanced at the screen, and his eyes widened at the headline: "Airport Security Fires Agent Willis After Racial Profiling Verdict in Hayes Case." The news hit him with a mix of satisfaction and a strange sense of finality. He hadn't expected the agency to take action so swiftly. After all, he knew how often institutions were reluctant to admit fault, let alone dismiss employees for conduct like this. But there it was, staring up at him in bold letters. Willis was out. Marcus leaned back in his chair, letting the weight of the news settle over him. He thought back to the trial, the way Willis had sat across the room, shoulders squared, still radiating that smug, unshakable confidence. The man had taken the stand with that same arrogance, acting as though Marcus's experiences were exaggerated, as if he had simply been doing his job. Even as evidence mounted against him, Willis had seemed convinced he'd walk away unscathed, and yet, now he was gone. For a moment, Marcus wondered how Willis was taking it, losing his job, being exposed for his bias on such a public stage. Would it make him reflect, or would he carry that same entitlement, that same prejudice, wherever he went next? Marcus doubted a person like Willis would have a change of heart so easily. But then again, the firing wasn't about Willis. Not really. It was about everyone who'd ever been treated the way Marcus had been, about drawing a line in the sand and saying enough was enough. This was bigger than Willis's fate. It was about making sure others would think twice before letting their biases guide their decisions. He felt a surge of relief, knowing that his experience, his suffering, frustration, and relentless fight had meant something. If airport security could take action like this, maybe it would serve as a message to others who wielded authority carelessly, who thought they could get away with degrading others simply because of appearances. A knock on his door broke him from his thoughts. Ava stepped in, holding a coffee mug, her expression warm as she caught the headline on his screen. "Looks like the system worked, even if it took a push," she said, handing him the coffee. Marcus nodded, a small smile forming. "I wasn't sure they'd actually fire him. Part of me thought they'd just issue a statement and keep it quiet." "Well, this is what happens when you put in the work and hold people accountable," she replied, her voice full of admiration. "You've done more than just win a case, Marcus. You've shown them they can't hide behind procedures when those procedures are driven by prejudice. He looked down, the truth of her words settling in. You know, I didn't file this lawsuit to get him fired. I couldn't let what happened go unchallenged. People like him think they're untouchable. And now they know they're not, Eva said, nodding. You've done something incredible. Something that goes beyond one person. Maybe Willis won't change, but others will think twice. They'll know someone's watching. Marcus leaned back, the weight of everything finally lifting. I never wanted to be in this position, but I'm glad I didn't back down. You did this for all of us, Eva said softly. For everyone who's felt small in front of people like Willis. And you gave them a voice. He nodded, a wave of emotion swelling in his chest. His case had grown beyond just seeking justice for himself. It had become a movement, a message, and as much as the fight had taken from him, he knew he'd do it all over again. Marcus turned back to his computer screen, reading the headline once more. For the first time since that day in the airport, he felt a true sense of peace. The system was far from perfect, but today, it had worked, and he had helped make that happen.